Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where you'll find information on what's going on the North Fork of Long Island. We'll be focusing on issues and opportunities going on in the community, as well as people and stories from the present and the past. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 46, our guest today is George Giannaris. He is the chef and owner of Hellenic Restaurant, and we discuss his ancestry, his childhood growing up in Queens, and how his family eventually moved to the North Fork. We also cover how the restaurant got started, how it has evolved over the years, and some new features of the restaurant, and also what he thinks about the North Fork today. So I hope you enjoy episode 46 with George Giannaris. This episode was recorded April 22nd, 2024. Thank you so much for coming on to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today.
My pleasure.
And just to start off, I'd like to do, if you could do a little introduction where you were born and raised.
Sure. My name is George Giannaris. I was born in Queens, Astoria, New York. That's kind of where a lot of Greek people migrated to back in the 70s. I was raised up until grade school in Astoria. I went to PS 70, and then I moved to Greece for 2 years. I lived there for 2 winters, and I went so that I did junior high school in Greece, and then I went to high school in Greenport. And then I went to Stony Brook University. And
Nice.
Yeah.
And then for your ancestry, how far back can you track on both of your parents' side?
Pretty much to great-grandparents. I haven't gone beyond that.
Do you know where they were located in Greece?
Yeah. Well, my grandparents migrated from, I think it was a Greek area that was dominated by Turkey. So they moved from, it's called Mikrasia, and that was moved. Then they moved to Evia, which is a peninsula in Greece. That would be my grandparents. I don't know where my great grandparents were. My from my father's side. From my mother's side, I believe my great grandparents and my grandparents started out in Nisiros. It's a small island in the it's called the Dodecanisa. It means 12 islands, a cluster of very small islands in Greece. Mm-hmm. So that's where I could trace them back to.
And was it your parents that immigrated to the U.S.?
My mother's parents, my grandparents on my mother's side, immigrated to the United States. I'm first generation. My father immigrated here. But my mom's parents immigrated here first. My mother came here when she was 9. My father came in here when he was in his early 20s or late teens.
And did you get to meet some of your grandparents or all?
I met my grandparents from my mother's side and my grandmother from my father's side. My grandfather from my father's side had passed away before I was born.
Mm. And on your mom's side, did they say why they moved to the U.S.?
Yeah, I believe that many immigrants came here for the same reason, for better life, potentially greater wealth. The war really obliterated a lot of Greece back in the 40s when my father and my mother were children. So they were looking probably for more stability. The United States had a huge presence during World War II, especially in Europe. Mm-hmm. And Greece, the most European countries after World War II did not have very stable governments. It was very shaky. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what caused a lot of the immigrants to want to come to the United States.
And for your parents, let's say your dad, was he located in, did he relocate to Queens in that area when he first came over?
Yes, yes, he did. They both my parents both lived in Queens when they were married.
And you said that was there's a big Greek population was it in Astoria?
Yeah, that whole area, Astoria, Bayside, Flushing, has a pretty strong Greek presence even today.
Mm-hmm.
More so back then. Now it's clearly multicultural, a lot more multicultural than it was back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents got married in the 60s. I was born in 69. So back then, there were clusters. You had your Italian neighborhoods, you had your Greek neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. So Astoria was predominantly Greek.
And did he say it was his experience first coming over and kind of adapting to the U.S. and how old was he when he came over?
Boy, let me think about this for a second. Probably, I guess he was in his 20s.
In his 20s?
Mid-20s.
And did he ever say kind of what initially he ended up working or doing when he settled in Astoria?
Yeah, my father started out as a painter, and then he became a waiter at the Plaza Hotel in the banquet area. And he also helped my uncle who had a donut shop. So my father had 3 jobs. He worked here. So yeah, he's very clear about that. Yeah.
And what about your mom?
My mom graduated high school and was able to continue her education, but she got married. And kind of back then, it was one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And a woman continuing her education was a little bit, and potentially not becoming a wife was very much frowned upon back in the day. So my mom chose to be a bride and a homemaker as opposed to her passion, which happened to be fashion. I think she should have stuck with fashion.
So, I guess how did they meet?
Oh, that's a good story. Actually, I wrote a book about my life, and I mentioned it in the book. It was a fascinating story. My father was a really strong guy. He had a really strong physique, and he was painting the apartment building, I believe, next to my grandfather's residence. And he bent over to mix up a pail of paint, and my grandfather looked at his back. My mother's father looked at his back and knew he was strong.
Yeah.
So when my mother was dating my father secretly, and when he found out who he was, he remembered how he had a strong back and he would be a good worker. So he okayed it.
That was good enough.
That was the telltale. This strong back was really the prerequisite to being married to my mother, apparently.
Wow. No, that's interesting. And so then they were settled in that area. You were born in Queens?
Mm-hmm.
And did you have any siblings?
No, my mom unfortunately had 4 miscarriages before me. Yeah, sadly. And so unfortunately, no brothers or sisters.
And so how was it kind of for you as a child? How would you describe that neighborhood that you grew up in? Because how long were you there for?
12 years. I loved it. So my grandfather had an apartment building, and he lived on the first floor. We lived on the second floor, and my only first cousins in the United States lived on the third floor. My uncles lived in that building too. So it was we all lived under one roof. My grandmother would cook almost every day, and we would all gather downstairs in her apartment. We had a parking lot next to our apartment house, so there was always kids playing. I mean, the crime started to get pretty bad in the mid-70s, so it was a little scary to be there. But other than that, we had a really fun childhood. Like I didn't have brothers and sisters, but my cousins were there. So, and plus, my other cousins lived 2 blocks over, so we would visit there, and my other cousins lived 2 blocks over in the other direction. So we always had family around us. It wasn't so much, I guess, would that term be a non-satellite family? I don't know. I'm not sure about the terminology, but we were very close together.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were separated and we had to travel to see one another. The funny thing is my wife lived 4 blocks over from, or 5 blocks over from where I lived, and never met her.
Wow.
Yeah.
But was that nice in some ways, having family close by? And then would you said you would have meals, but I mean, what was it that family would get together every Sunday, or was it on other days? Because I know for Italians, it's usually Sundays, meatballs, spaghetti.
I mean, we would if we didn't eat 2 or 3 times a week at my grandmother's table, we would definitely go downstairs and grab a snack off the table almost every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't just a one day a week thing.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned a little bit about the neighborhood, but were there any kind of memories that you had of other things, of just playing outside, kind of what you might do for fun in the area? I know you said it started to feel somewhat unsafe, but
like, your world when you're small seems so huge, looking back. My entire existence, the majority of my existence and the time I spent with my friends and family was on one block. We weren't allowed to leave that block. We were never allowed to go to Steinway Street by ourselves. By the way, I lived around the corner from Steinway Street. It's a famous street in Astoria. And we were never allowed to go there by ourselves. We basically played where any one of my parents, grandparents, or aunt and uncle could see us from the window. So that's where we spent our time. And then in the summers, we would come out to Greenport. So that was... Even
as... when you were young, like as a child?
Yeah. We would... I don't have any memories before Greenport. I probably came here when I was 1 or 2. My mom and dad my father had family that owned a house out here, and they would rent a spot for us. And then my mom's cousin, who's my uncle, he bought a house too, so we would rent the spot from him. It was great because back who takes off whole summers now? It's like impossible. If you're lucky if you get a week or 2. We used to take the whole summer and come out here. As soon as school was over, we'd just hop in the car and head out.
And before we get more to Greenport, I was just curious about school in Astoria. How was that experience and the classroom environment? And
it was good. I used to go to Greek school also, which I hated very much. It was because I used to also take karate, so my whole life was kind of surrounded by school. PS 70 public school was great. I think I got a really good education. I mean, I remember advancing pretty quickly, but when I moved to Greece and I lived there for 2 years, like, that's when I realized how little I knew about math. I did so much math in junior high school in Greece that I didn't even touch on it until I got into my senior year in high school here in the United States. So they were far more advanced in math in Europe than they were here. But overall, I think my education was great. The experience was, as I think most people remember it from back in the 70s, a lot more tough than it was now. A lot more memorization, a lot more rigorous, I would say. But it was a good experience.
And did your parents want you to learn Greek?
Yes.
Was that an important thing from the beginning?
It was huge. It was a big deal. Learning Greek was huge. As a matter of fact, I really didn't learn Greek very well until I moved to Greece. That's when I nailed it. I mean, I think that's universal for anybody. You move to a foreign country, you learn the language. But that was huge. And as a matter of fact, I refused to teach my kids Greek. And I got a lot of backlash for it. And the reason why I didn't, there was 2 reasons. One, I didn't want to put that burden on my wife, and the only other way that they would be able to learn Greek was if we had to drive them to Southampton on a Saturday, because the only people that were offering Greek lessons at the time were in the Greek Orthodox Church in Southampton. And I did not want my kids to have that experience. But my wife, before Marie and I got married, her passion was teaching, and she did teach for a while. She was actually teaching in Mattituck High School. So we're both very good at math. Mm-hmm. And I felt that genetically my kids might have a predisposition towards math. So I wanted them to really be good at math. So rather than teach them Greek, we taught them math and sciences. Not in a they went to public schools and private schools, but they were homeschooled in math. And it worked out. You know, my kids can't speak Greek, but my youngest graduated from culinary school in France, and he speaks French. Mm-hmm. And my oldest graduated with a master's in computer science from MIT. So I think we made the right call.
Yeah. But at that time, there wasn't a Greek school on the North Fork.
No, there still isn't.
There was never that we know of. Mm-mm. Just the one in Southampton. But you think that they, even though they don't know the language, they still. Because I know today some people are some people might be passionate about certain things with identity, and I know that there's the Polish American school, and I know they teach, they make the kids go to school there. And
you mean the impact that culture had on
your kids?
So I had a very difficult teenage life in that I established myself amongst my family members and friends in Queens, and then I was uprooted to Greece. Mm-hmm. And in Greece I was frowned upon for being an American. I was an outsider, and it was just a European thing. So while I was in Greece in junior high school, life continued here in the United States. So my friends and family never left Queens. They established tighter bonds and roots. When I came back, I moved directly to Greenport, went to Greenport High School. And I was immersed in a culture that most of the people in Greenport were there from grade school. And I was the outsider again. So I transitioned to Greece, where I was the outsider. Finally got set up a little bit, where I had a little bit of it took a couple years, but then I was uprooted, came to the United States, back to Greenport, was the outsider again. There was a clique amongst non-Greeks. I was probably the only Greek person, or one of three Greek people in the school, and the other two had gone there for high school. So I was an outsider again. So I did not want my kids to be typecasted in any kind of ethnicity. They're American. We live in the United States. We have a beautiful culture. The Greek culture is beautiful. We celebrate it in our home. But I'd rather that, and that's kind of part of the reason why I didn't want my kids to learn Greek, is because I wanted them to be American first. You're born here. You are going to be they were both going to be intelligent human beings, whether they liked it or not, just because we watched them grow and we knew they were going to be smart. So if they wanted to learn another language, they'd be more than welcome to. And one of them did. So do I celebrate my ethnicity? 100%. I own a Greek restaurant. Mm-hmm. I absolutely celebrate my ethnicity. Does it define who I am? Historically. But I'm an American. Mm-hmm. And I want my kids to be Americans first.
And could you talk a little bit about you had family out here? Did they ever say what kind of attracted them to the North Fork?
The water.
Early
100%. The Greeks love the ocean and everything ocean related. Greece is surrounded by water. I mean, there are parts that are north, but even those people, they go in the summer. They go down to the ocean. They'll go down to the Mediterranean, and so it would, and also open spaces, the rustic environment, farming definitely is all part of the Greek culture. That's what brought me. I mean, there is nothing. I mean, now there is, but nothing in the five boroughs resembles nearly anything in Greece. Maybe Athens, but not back then. Athens is built up now, but it never was. So the closest thing to home was Long Island.
And You were more out here for high school?
Yes, I was here from ninth grade to 12th grade.
What year was that
That was 1983 to 87.
What did you think of Greenport?
I mean, I think every teenager out here at some point or another felt that there was a lot more to do somewhere else, especially when they were in contact with Manhattan or up west, we used to call it. You see that there's significantly more available for teenagers. It was tough. It was a lot of, it helped build relationships. You found a few friends, you hung out with those friends. You made do with your environment. We learned to be more rural than urban. We had more fun, doing things like boating, hiking, camping, hunting, things like that. And then, of course, that was the era where computers started to become more affordable or cheaper than anybody can own. Commodore 64, Atari, that kind of stuff. So a lot of video gaming back then. No online. There was no internet. So we would get together. We would hang out. We would play games. We would enjoy the outdoors. And we made do. And everybody always had that same kind of thought in their mind, like, oh, there's so much more to do up west. And then we would go. The big deal was going to Smith Haven Mall, getting your license, driving up to Smith Haven Mall was like huge, and then, getting into the city and growing up, all that. And I would go into the city a lot on the weekends because I had family there. So, but it was hard. If you were raised in an urban environment, it was really, really hard. But if you weren't, it was kind of nice. It was rustic, rural.
And your parents moving out here full time, when did that happen?
That happened in 83. When we moved back from Greece, we decided not to go. The game plan was to basically run the Hellenic in the summer months and then live in Greece in the winter months. And this happened for 2 years. And then at the end of the second year, my father pulled me aside and he says, I'm going to go back because I had to wait till school let out before I can come back. And my father wanted to open the restaurant by Memorial Day. So he says, I'm going back and I'm going to open the restaurant. Take whatever belongings that are important to you and bring them with you because we're not going to come back next year. And I said, Dad, why? And he said, because this country doesn't work and they're going to go bankrupt. That was what he said. It was like a little premonition, I think. My father then explained to me later on that he didn't want to make me an immigrant. He was taking me away from the United States and basically making me an immigrant in Greece. And he didn't want me to experience that. And I never forgot that. And that's a big reason why I wanted my kids to really be rooted in this country first. And again, I got a lot of backlash for it. Greeks would disagree with me wholeheartedly. But I don't think my children suffered at all. I think they experienced, my wife is not technically Greek. She's Cyprian, which is not part of Greece, but it's, for all intents and purposes, it's Greek. But my kids were never spared the Cyprian culture, the Greek culture at all. But I never wanted to make them immigrants either.
And with the Hellenic, what was it before your father bought the building?
It was a bunch of cottages and a snack bar. It was called Brown's Cabins, which there are rumors that there was a big house on it that burnt down. It was called the main house. Apparently, I don't have documentation for this, but this is hearsay. So unless someone else can chime in who is more of a historian, then they could give me some definitive facts, and I'll gladly share them with you later on a later date, because I'm not 100% sure about this. But the main house used to be the restaurant, from what I understand, or an inn of some sort. And there are rumors that George Washington actually was there at some point. So it goes back that far. The Brown family had it for a very long time. How far back, I don't know. But they had cottages there. And my mother's cousin, Gus Hartofellis, wanted to purchase Brown Cabins. And he was looking for someone to do some of the manual labor. So he approached my grandfather and said, do you know anybody who might be interested in partnering with me on this? Because there were like 18 cottages in the snack bar. And my grandfather suggested it to my father. And my father said, I want to do this. So my mother's cousin Gus, he had some interest in rentals, so he wanted to basically capitalize on the cabins. My father, he spent all his time cooking. My grandfather was a cook. My father was a cook. So he wanted to take over the snack bar. So they had an agreement where I'll take over the snack bar, you'll take over the cabins, and that's how it became Hellenic Cabins and Snack Bar. That's how it was originally in '76 when they took over.
So you could stay there initially?
Yeah, we used to stay before Hellenic Snack Bar, we used to stay at my uncle Gus's house in East Marion. When we purchased the Hellenic Snack Bar with him, we then stayed in cabin number 15, actually. If you want to be specific.
Yeah. And what was the initial idea that they wanted to do with the snack bar?
Just basically supply snacks, food, candy, gum, ice cream for the people that stayed in the cottages. That's how it started originally.
And how did it kind of transform? Because I remember reading about lemonade and...
That was it. My dad was both my parents are really, they have an incredible palate. My dad, I think maybe more so than my mom. You know, like you could say that here's the way I would describe it. So let's say my mom and dad were musicians and they both played really, really, really well. My dad was Jimi Hendrix. You know what I'm saying? So he came up with the lemonade, which is basically, and people still don't believe it to this day. They think I'm lying. It's lemon, ice, sugar, water. That's it. But it's a great proportion. And the key is it's made fresh to order. And there was no air conditioning back then. So people wanted something cool. And literally, and it's no exaggeration, there were lines out the door for people to get his lemonade. So when they came in for the lemonade, my dad transitioned from making burgers and hot dogs and things of that nature to souvlaki, which is little skewers wrapped in pita bread, to spinach pie, to Greek fare. And when they experienced that, the way he made it, they flipped out. And it used to be mobbed. I mean, that place was packed all the time. And my dad manned every part of it, every facet of that restaurant he handled by himself. He worked 7 days a week, 17 hours a day. He didn't care. And my mom too.
Wow. Did you work there while you were in high school?
I started working there 20 hours a week when I was 10.
Wow.
And then by the age of 12, I was in charge of cubing up the pork for the souvlaki sandwiches with my dad. That was 700 pounds a week. I was working full time at 12 years old, 40 hours a week. By the time I was 16, I worked the front line and cleaned the restaurant. So I was up to like my dad, 14, 15-hour days.
Wow. But that was kind of just expected of you to help out with your dad wanting you to be a part of it, but...
Well, it wasn't that it was expected, per se, like, you have to do this, you're my son. It was like, you have to do this or we're going to die. Because, you know, I mean, this is a lot of work and we need as much help as we can. And everybody, I mean, it was my grandmother. You ever see one of those the handheld mandolins? Mm-hmm. She would literally slice the tomatoes and onions using a mandolin by hand. And she would sit on the porch at cabin 14 and she would sit there and slice tomatoes and onions all day long. That's what she would do. And then my grandfather was the handyman. He would fix everything. And then my mother would man the front counter. And, you know, and then we also had my father's partner's wife, Helen. She would work in there. Not as much as my parents. And then Melissa, she was Gus's daughter. She would waitress. Everybody jumped in and helped. Mm-hmm. It was just, you know, it was a big deal for an immigrant family to have a successful business. You know, it was you nurture that baby. You know, you don't let that die. Yes. You know, when the going gets tough, you get tougher and you work harder, and that's how it was.
Mm. And then for you working that whole time, and then. Did you kind of know what you wanted to do coming out of high school?
Absolutely. I had a passion for the sciences and I wanted to be an electrical engineer. So I went to Stony Brook and I got my bachelor's of engineering in electrical engineering with just a couple courses shy of a minor in computer science. But at the time, 1991, we had given political asylum to the Middle East. We had a huge influx of very bright students. There was a tremendous salary drop in engineering. So I had a choice. I could either move forward, potentially get a master's, or work at the restaurant and get 2 months out of the year off. So I opted for that. I did not want to go back. I just was burnt out from studying. I did not want to get my master's.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back into the restaurant business.
And how were your parents? Would your dad ever say he wanted you to work at the restaurant, or he definitely wanted to support you with going to college and whatever you wanted to do?
Both my parents were incredibly supportive of what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
They never put an anchor around me. It was never related to the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
It was that me coming back was my choice.
And when did you come back to the restaurant?
So I graduated from Stony Brook in 92. I started working in the restaurant. In 95, I convinced my dad to help me to open up another Hellenic in Hampton Bays.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I was engaged. From 92 to 95, I was dating and I was engaged with my bride. We both moved to Hampton Bays. We had a Hellenic there. There's a big difference between, and I want to share this with anybody who's interested in owning a restaurant because they work in a restaurant. Mm-hmm. There's a tremendous difference between working in a restaurant and being a restaurateur, which would be working and owning a restaurant. It's dramatic. Mm-hmm. Moving to the Hamptons and opening up a restaurant there was an incredible learning experience for me. I realized that it was a hard learning curve, but I also realized that my dad was 60 at the time, and I learned what it took to run a restaurant, and I brought it back with me when I closed my restaurant in Hampton Bays in 1998. So since 1998, I have been in charge of running Hellenic in East Marion.
But was the other one a similar fare?
Yeah, similar, same kind of concept. It just didn't. I didn't know enough. I was too young. But when I came back, I knew a lot. So I was able to take this Hellenic to a level that it needed, because remember that we migrated from a family farm town to a wine, beer, sea destination. Brings in a huge different clientele. Mm-hmm. Could it have survived as a snack bar? Probably better, because people, I think, kind of gravitate to these nostalgic places. But the clientele was definitely asking for more and different. And so if I hadn't gone to the Hamptons, I'm not sure what would have happened to Hellenic.
And when did it kind of change from a snack bar to the Hellenic Restaurant?
It happened in 85. My father's partner, Gus, kept this a big secret. He had a congenitive heart failure. And at the time, he was in the process of selling the whole business to my father. He has a son named Michael, and Michael wanted to intervene and step in and become the new owner. So the transaction never happened. So we do have partners, my cousin Michael. And mm-hmm. So at the time, we went from 4 tables, 6 stools, to, I don't know, at the time it was like, 200 seats? So it was a big jump. Mm-hmm. And that happened in 85. But we kept the name. We kept the name Snack Bar up until this year. I took the Snack Bar off the building for the first time this year. I tried going the route, snack bars in our name so we could remember our roots. We, show people the photographs of the snack bar. This is where we started. But after being in business for 48 years, people come out here. They don't care if you've been there for 48 years. They go, if they're new to the area, they go to Google. And when they see Snack Bar, they get confused. So we had to take it off.
Yeah. And could you just describe some of the changes that were made for the menu at that time, kind of? Because you had the you said
Souvlaki.
Slovaki,
Yeah.
and kind of like gyro.
Yeah, yeah. That's basically so. Souvlaki means mini skewer.
Mm.
Gyro means to turn. So
Yeah.
it's the sliced beef and the pork and the chicken are cubes, and falafel now that we have. So basically anything that was on our menu in 1976, oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that, 77, because in 1976 it was just burgers and hot dogs. 77 is when we introduced the Greek fare to the menu. Has not changed. That's it. It's all, and then we just kept adding to the menu. So pretty much if you had it in 77 and you came back in 2025, 4, you should still be able to get it.
And over the last few years, have you've added a few other things to the restaurant, like the gelato, and was there something else I'm trying to think of? Well, I mean, have you done any more expansion of the restaurant since 84?
Yeah, as far as the physical size of the building,
Yeah.
not really. I mean, we used to have plastic drops on the outside patio that we changed it to sliders. We used to have a bar inside in the back room. We moved it to the outside. Well, that's not true. That we used to have an outdoor seating area that was a tent. We made it a permanent building. That happened in like 2002. But as far as changing the physical size of the restaurant, we haven't. If anything, we've shrunk it a little bit. We're allowed to have 250 seats. We operate with about 180. So in the inside, we have the gelato counter now, and that was all a byproduct of the pandemic. We needed a larger takeout area. During the pandemic, we basically set up barriers, which were the dining room tables, and then we said, well, let's see how takeout is now that the pandemic is over, and takeout remained incredibly strong. So we put temporary counters just to see what would happen, and takeout was just as strong as it was during the pandemic. So now we have a more permanent counter, and I wanted to showcase my gelato, which I make from scratch, all natural, and I wanted to bring it to the forefront where people can see it so they can order it. I'm a little fanatic when it comes to quality of food and ingredients, possibly to my financial detriment, but definitely to the health of my customers. I love ice cream, adore ice cream, but when the price of milk went up and everything skyrocketed probably about 10 or so years ago, the quality of the ice cream went down the tubes. And they started putting additives, and they took away the natural. You could taste it, you could feel it. When you were done eating an ice cream, you didn't feel good. So I decided to go to gelato school and learn how to make gelato myself. I started with a little tiny corner in the back of the restaurant where my staff could scoop it. And the most impressive thing about the gelato was when it came right out of the machine. I said, "Oh man, I wish I could serve my customers right out of the machine because the flavor is so unique." So creamy and fresh. And I went to my sales rep who sells machinery and stuff, and I said, man, they got to figure out a way of serving it right out of the machine. And he says they do. So last year I basically bought a machine for every flavor, and I served my gelato made to order, fresh out of the machine, and it is spectacular.
Wow.
So that would be the last and hopefully final edition. I'm in my 50s. I don't want to add any more.
But you do play around with what other items you might want to add to the menu all the time. Like, do you rotate? Like, you'll have, like you said, this standard fare that you have kept, but you do you get any inspiration from any other? Yeah, kind of, where do you get some of your inspiration from?
I mean, I get my inspiration from anything that I taste that I think is worthy of being put on the menu. I delve deeply into that. I went to Spain, introduced myself. See, when I was in Spain, I was very much into finding out, tasting what's called Iberico jamón. Iberico pigs are unique pigs. They feed them acorns only. So when the meat gets cured, the flavor is unlike anything you've ever had in a cured meat. I didn't realize that you can also purchase Iberico pork that's not cured. So when I had it in Spain, I was blown away by the taste. The octopus in Spain was very different than the octopus that I've had other parts of the world, especially when it's called ocean dayboat from the Atlantic. It's cooler waters. Most of the octopus we get here that's called Spanish octopus comes from actually the southern part, and it's a lot more algae. It's a different flavor. I'm just giving this as an example. So now on my menu, I only serve dayboat Atlantic octopus that I was able to procure from a company that imports it, and I serve Iberico pork chops. And my wife's cousin showed me how to recure olives. You buy them and they're brined and they're kind of very sour or vinegary or salty. So he taught me how to recure them. That made it to the menu. Anything that will really produce a unique flavor or quality that I can feasibly serve, I do.
And with a lot of this, like as you said, you're very passionate with the food and the process with making it or curing it or other techniques. How do you kind of balance and find the time with making sure you have all these items ready and prepared, fresh and ready to go? Because it's definitely a lot of work and time consuming, but it's also like you said, the product and what you provide for your customer is important.
Well, I think I could not give a nod to my degree in electrical engineering, and I'll tie it in a second. So, when I went to school as an engineer, I learned very little about electrical engineering, probably enough to get me my foot in the door, just like anyone else. Like if you're a dentist, right, you don't learn what an individual case is until you experience it, right? Everybody's mouth is different, so on and so forth. So you basically gives you an entry into whatever practice you want. You graduate, it's like your admission ticket. But what engineering did do for me is it helped me to become an incredible problem solver. We were given enormously difficult, challenging problems in very short periods of time to solve. That's the restaurant business. So I was able to take my engineering degree and my passion for computer science and use it to my advantage. My father, when I came back to the restaurant in 1998, I told him we have to have a point of sale system. This is not going to work. And his first question was not what can it do for us, was how much. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, it was very expensive. And he says, there is no way that I'm going to spend $60,000 on a point of sale system. Mm-hmm. So I wrote my own. I wrote my own inventory management program. I did all of this while I was working at the restaurant because I could, from my engineering degree, allowed me the opportunity to balance my time very effectively. So when I create a gelato recipe, there's a computer program that takes down all the ingredients, multiplies the product, what I need, cross-analyzes it with how many customers I used, how much I sold, how much I need, cross-references it to historical sales, and I know exactly what I need to buy to get through the week, probably at an advantage than most restaurateurs. So that's what helps me to have such a vast menu and offer such a huge selection efficiently without, losing money.
And through the 80s to now, would you describe a little bit how business has been? And I know you mentioned during COVID, was that still somewhat of a tough period, but the community was supportive in terms of, you said, with takeout, and then even after, how has business been for the restaurant?
So during the pandemic, our community, in essence, doubled. We had a lot of people move out here. So takeout was great. Business was fantastic.
You weren't expecting that?
No, I was actually thinking we were going to shut down. And I had one of my staff members, and it's a nod to Christine because I'll never forget the day. She goes, well, why don't we just open it for takeout and see how it goes? And we were mobbed. I think 2021 was like the first year. So it's really hard to stay in business out here because if you want to give proper service, you got to keep your employees year round, period. Mm-hmm. And that's a very expensive proposition. I think that was the only year where I didn't have to like bleed profusely to stay in business for the summer because people were out here. Then of course when they went back, everything kind of went status quo again. It wasn't great. Business has always been good. It's just hard to be open all year. It's very challenging. There's a lot of challenges on local businesses because if you want the service, you got to have the staff. If you want the staff, you got to pay them all year. If you don't pay them all year, you got new people coming and new people don't know what they're doing, and you don't get the service, and it's just like it's a vicious cycle. This area here, I mean, you got to remember it's harder for people to eat at Hellenic when the majority of them live in Mattatuck. Very few people want to have a drink. They want to enjoy themselves. They have to think twice about driving 15, 16 miles. So we're busy in the summer, and that's it. We have a decent business in the woods. I'm not going to complain, but it's the summer months that keep us afloat.
Yeah, I think that's something that I don't know if residents. I know that there's year-round residents, and I think with other businesses that might be closed in the winter, they might wish that those were open all year. But like you said, it's a tough thing, and you're still open all year round. But I mean, we are getting more year-round residents, but it's still, like you said, you get much more influx in the summer.
Yeah, we do close December, January. Just so you know, we've always have. We've always closed in the winter months for a couple of months, and it gives us a chance to regroup. Just want to be clear about that, so people who get pissed at me every single year for closing don't say he's not open. You'll get hate mail. You'll get trolls trolling you.
Oh no. Yeah. No, and just kind of thinking about the restaurant today, what is something that continues to make you be the chef and owner of Hellenic, and just what you enjoy most about your job and career and passion?
That's a lot of answers there.
Sorry.
It's okay. I think my favorite time is getting there at 5 in the morning when no one's there, cranking some tunes in the kitchen, experimenting with recipes, streamlining. Love being able to offer more to my customers. I have really loyal customers. And it's interesting too, because we've been around so long that a lot of my older customers have died. I mean, think about it, 48 years, you're going to lose customers. And then you have a whole new era of people coming in that are the future regulars. So you meet all these people. It's lovely to be able to be acquainted to people. The unfortunate thing is I'm a working chef who owns a restaurant, so I don't have the privilege of spending time in the front of the house because I want to make sure everything is consistent from the back of the house. And it's not that my team can't handle it. It's just a little different when someone who owns the place kind of oversees everything. There are minor details. There's a lot of our menu is not simple. It's not like take it out, heat it, send it. It's a challenging menu, and the beauty of it comes in the nuances. So I have to keep on top of that. My wife keeps on top of everything. She's in the front. Maria's, she handles the front of the house. Debbie, my manager, 46 years. I mean, how many people can say they have a manager for 46 years?
Wow.
She keeps on. She keeps the staff together. We have established a lot of things, mission, vision, core values. We make everybody memorize them. We make sure that everybody's on top of their game. And even there, you're still going to have your failures, My grandfather had an expression, he said in Greek, it says, if you keep an eye on all of your clothing, you're still going to wind up with half, And that's kind of the business. I mean, no matter, even if you stick with it, you pour yourself into it, you're not going to have 100%. So what happens if you don't? It's a sure formula. And then, it's different too. When I was in the industry, decades ago, the margins were huge. Now it's like you every day you have a little piece of the pie sliced from some. I mean, any business, right? Mm-hmm. So if you don't keep on top of it, because at some point it's not profitable anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's close. It's really hard. I think a lot of restaurateurs would agree with me. Out here, I mean, take Hellenic and make it as busy as it is July and August for the other 10 months. It's no issue, but it's not. So we gotta be there. But I don't mind the challenge. Mm-hmm. And certainly my customers keep me going for mm-hmm. sure.
And also, separate from the restaurant, you've also written 2 books called Fairy Tales and Fairy Tales 2. How did that idea come about?
In 2002, no, 2000, yeah, no, maybe 2000, yeah, I think it was 2002 or so. Rick and Ellie Coffee are my dearest friends from next door to the restaurant. They opened up the Coffee House, and it's Coffey, Coffee House Bed and Breakfast, and they were customers. And Rick is connected with a lot of writers, published authors. He decided one day to have this thing called the North Fork Writers Guild, as he affectionately called it. And he was inviting a bunch of authors to come over and spend the weekend at the bed and breakfast. And he said to me, he says, if you want, you could join us for a glass of wine or something if you're free. And I said, do I have to be a published author? And he goes, no, but if you love to write, it'll help. I go, yeah, I like to write. I'm kind of in the process of writing a book. At the time, I was just basically penning down my memoirs because I had spoken to my mom about certain events that had occurred, and it was so memorable to me, and she had no recollection of them, and that blew me away. And I said, wow, how long will it be before I don't remember these things? So every time I would think of a funny story, I would just jot it down. And Rick forced me to hand over my paper. I had about 100 pages. He forced me to hand it over to him. And I did. So the next day they come to the restaurant, Rick and Ellie, and they got bloodshot eyes. And they said to me, we were up all night reading this, and you need to finish this. And Rick pushed me to write Fairy Tales. And that's how that came about. And then, of course, the sequel, Fairy Tales 2, came out about 8 years later. Fairy Tales 2 is called When Hellenic Freezes Over. And Ellie came up with both titles. So they've been an integral part of me publishing those 2 books.
And were those, you said those were kind of stories from your past or from your family, and you kind of adjusted some things within it, or? No,
they were other than one short story that's in there that's kind of was fudged a lot because it was just a funny chapter, and I just felt like doing it. Everything else is 100% happened.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I got a little flack for that too. You can't be too honest. You remember when you publish something, it's everybody reads it. So I got into some trouble for being a little too honest. But hey, it is.
I'll be like, is that me in there, or is that? Yeah, kind of like if you use different names or.
Well, I think the big issue was so there's one chapter called "Are You Greek?" Mm-hmm. And every culture has their own nuances, right? Mm-hmm. If maybe it's a lot more frowned upon now than it was back when I wrote the book in 2008. You don't kind of make fun of people, ethnicities, because that's racism or stereotyping, whatever. Mm-hmm. But all candidness, Greeks have certain cliques, Italians have certain. It's just a culture, right? So. Mm-hmm. One of the chapters I wrote about was how certain Greek people behave when they come to the restaurant. And boy, did they did not like that. The Greek community was up and up. I mean, the kids loved it.
Yeah.
The parents, and I think mostly they didn't get it. It was kind of like, when you roast somebody,
Yeah.
You say, wow, how can that person tolerate what they're doing to them? But, it's a roast, and that's what it is. So I got a little trouble for that, but whatever.
Yeah. And then also, you started a YouTube channel called A Warehouse Chef. A Warehouse Chef.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so I had some when I graduated from Stony Brook back in 1992, I basically lived on a diet of sushi and beer. I ate a lot of sushi. Back in 1992, the health department did not make you freeze sushi. Now they do. Most people don't know that, but your fish has to be either cryogenically frozen for 24 hours at minus 40 degrees, or has to be held at minus 4 degrees for a week. The reason why is because raw fish contains parasites. And I had developed a serious parasitic problem. I was like, right now I'm like 200 something pounds. I think I was like 155 back then. And basically that was being eaten up from the outside. No doctors knew what to do. I sought nutritional help and overcame it. I know a lot of people who've died from that. And, that was like my first quest to understanding nutrition and health and how to eat healthy and the proper way to cook. What is good for you? What is bad for you? What is considered good for you but may not be good for you? And I noticed that a lot of my friends and loved ones had no concept of that. And they would say, oh, yeah, I'm eating healthy now. And I'm like, that's completely not healthy. So I spent a lot of time trying to educate them. And I said, you know what? I really should start a YouTube channel on how to do this, how to cook, eat healthy, save money, and cook like a pro. Help people. A lot of people want to cook when they come home and they can't. They don't have time. So I built this channel around basically the need for two reasons. One, to help my friends eat healthy. And the second reason is I don't know how my kids would ever know my recipes. So I put a lot of my recipes on the YouTube channel so that they would be there documented and held there for a while. And then, everything evolves. The channel changed a little bit. I do a lot of product reviews, is Teflon safe? Oh, that kind of a thing, And it's done well. I mean, I'm at around 50 or so thousand subscribers and starting to be monetized now, and I'm having fun with that. And I have a YouTube coach who's helped me grow my channel now because I've been doing it. This is my 5th year. It's been fun. It's a good experience. I enjoy the process. Again, brings my engineering degree into it. I like editing video. I like all that stuff. So.
And is that also, how do you balance the time? Because it does take a while to still make a YouTube video and balance that with the restaurant. Because I know some people that there are some YouTube channels that just, if that's all they do, it's just the YouTube channel. But yeah, is that something that, in terms of video processing and how many you put out every month or 2 months?
I used to put out a video a week, and it was a lot of work. Let me go back a minute. When I was in high school, I was in junior year in high school. I didn't have much to put on my college resume. The usual stuff, some sports, whatever, clubs. And I found out the significance of having something on your college application, which I didn't have enough. So a couple of teachers approached me, and they said, we suggested that you are a candidate for Boys State, and you should go. And I'm like, what is it? It's like, it's really good. You should have that on your college resume. It's a big deal. You should have that on your college resume. He says, okay, I'll go to Boys State. Boys State was an institution. I'm not sure who set it up, but basically it took 1 to 3 students from every high school on Long Island, and they sent them upstate to New York for 10 days to learn about government. I have zero interest in government. Still didn't back then, still have no interest now. But it was good to have on my college resume. So we get up there, we're on a bus, we get all the way upstate, and as we land at Boys State, a drill sergeant from the Marines comes onto the bus and starts yelling and screaming at us and makes us pick up every single thing that's on the floor. We get out and we're in line, and basically we're at boot camp. Nobody knew what it was all about. I was not the most physical guy. I barely could do 10 push-ups when I got to Boys State. And every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, it was 3-mile run, push-ups all day long, and you learn about government. That's what you did. Basically, someone in Boys State would become the governor of Boys State, and we had to vote for him, and we learned the judicial process and everything and the voting process. So at the end of 10 days, they finally told us why we were there. None of us knew. Our drill sergeants became our best friends, and the one drill sergeant said, your teachers saw huge potential in you that you didn't see. And we're here to show you, just when you think you can't go any further, you can go a lot further than you think. By the end of Boys State, 50 push-ups was not a problem. Now, the food wasn't loaded with steroids, so I don't think it was the food or the time I spent there that made me go from 10 push-ups to 50, but it was the mindset. And that was the second most impactful thing that ever happened in my life. And it's still to this day, it's my drive. You know, I'm able to work at the restaurant nonstop, 50, 60, 70 hours, 80 hours a week, and spend 30, 40 hours putting out a YouTube video at the same time, because I'm really good at budgeting my time.
Mm. And then just in general now, in terms of the North Fork, what, over the years that you've continued to have the restaurant and live on the North Fork, what do you what have you enjoyed the most about the North Fork and the community out here?
Wow. Well, I love the changes. I love the relationship I have with the winemakers and the beer makers, the farmers. I love my friends who moved out here. Like, it takes a lot to move out to the North Fork, right? It's not so easy. Mm-hmm. So we all kind of have this common mindset. We really do enjoy this place as tourists. We enjoy the water. I love the ferries. I know it sounds funny, but just being able to go to New England, Shelter Island, Sag Harbor. I mean, what a great opportunity to enjoy the East Coast of the United States. I love that I can get fresh produce. I love that I can, go to one of the winemakers and say, hey, what's the simplest, purest wine that you have that has nothing but grapes in it? And, and they could say, oh, well, most of them, but try this one, and know exactly what I'm getting. Mm-hmm. I love that there's new, I love going to Ticlude and getting raw milk and getting grass-fed beef, and, all this stuff is fantastic. I mean, this is pretty cool, to have this kind of lifestyle and have this abundant natural resources around you. That's awesome, and let's not forget, 2 hours you're in the city. If you miss it, you're not that far away. My wife and I, my sons both live in the city now, so that we visit them by taking the train to from Ronkonkoma, park there, and cuts the driving in half. You don't have to pay for tolls, parking, speed cams. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's much better.
You can't beat it,
Yeah.
And then you also have a train back 24 hours a day, every half hour. I mean, how awesome is that? I can't wait till that happens. I hope one day the train will go all the way out to Riverhead. That would be so great.
Yeah, because that would be just another step in the right direction, and at least you could get on from the North Fork, kind of.
Oh, that would be so. I mean, now it's weird. Like, there's 3 trains that go from Mattituck from Manhattan to Mattituck, but there's only like 1 or 2 trains, or vice versa. I think only 1 train comes back or something. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's all weird times.
Yeah, and then my sons were out here, so we were going to drop them off at the Mattituck station. There's a sign on the door that says "No trains for the next 8 hours." I'm like, oh god. Yeah. My wife had to run them out to Ronkonkoma, so. Yeah. When they get that settled in, that'll be really, really excellent,
Mm-hmm. And, well, I guess it might be a little bit overlapping with the question, but what do you hope for the future of the North Fork and the community down the line, and how it develops?
Well, I'm really thankful that I hated it when I was younger, but I'm really thankful that Peconic Land Trust did what they did. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad that and I'm also really thankful that we don't have a lot of natural ocean around, no waterfront property around that's public. I know it sounds terrible. What I would love to see happen, I would love to see them put a harbor at Town Beach. It's really the only public access beach that we have out here for everybody. Mm-hmm. The rest of them are kind of hamlet driven, like you have to live in that hamlet. I wish that Town Beach would have like like Block Island does Old Harbor, where you can have boats come in and spend the night. And because right now, I mean, it seems like I think it's climate change. There really is no shoreline there anymore. Mm-hmm. I think they really need to do something to preserve that. Mm-hmm. But that's it. I think that's enough. We have enough growth out here. We have enough beautiful facilities for tourists, for day tourists. I think they should just leave that alone. We certainly don't need any more businesses out here because of the seasonality of it. It kills the year-rounders. I think it would be wonderful if the train would kind of give people an opportunity to commute more and make it a little bit more better for the youth, at least. If they at least had a train that went from, I mean, this is an ongoing thing and it's a discussion that's never going to change until it happens, but if there was a train that just went from Riverhead to Greenport back and forth, I mean, think about what that could do for the workforce out here. It's so hard to find people that want to work out here. They can't afford it.
Yeah.
It's ridiculously expensive to live out here. It's less expensive as you go further west, but if there was a train, let's say, that went continuously from Ronkonkoma to Greenport, wow, we could have a whole workforce come out here, and that would solve a lot of problems,
Definitely.
So that's the kind of thing I'd like to see. But as far as keeping everything the way that it is, without expanding it much more than it is, I think that would be great. And just it's enough. It's developed enough,
And I had just one or two questions left. I know you mentioned it a little bit when you had started the restaurant in Hampton Bays, but what advice would you give someone starting a restaurant? And I mean, it doesn't have to be for the North Fork. It can just be for anyone wanting to start a restaurant. What kind of advice would you give them in today's environment?
I would give them, if you had come up to me and said, hey, I want to start a restaurant, and I got a really good menu lined up, I got everything, like I know what I'm going to do and it's going to be a hit. I have no doubt in my mind that everything that I'm going to serve is going to be phenomenal. So let's start with that premise, right? Because you can't just open up something that's not unique. It's just not going to work. And if you're not going to do it better than the next person, then you shouldn't even start. But assuming you're past that point, the first thing you have to ask yourself, regardless of whether you're on the North Fork or not, is why will they come? You better know the answer to that. Why are they going to come to you? Because if you don't know that answer, then you can't portray that answer. And if you don't have that answer, they won't. And you're going to go out of business. And the second thing is, if you can't sit down and create a vision and a mission with 7 words max defining each, and then establish core values for that before you open your doors, then you will not know how to run your business. My vision is to offer an outstanding, hospitable, comfortable dining experience. I make sure that all my staff memorizes that. My mission is excellence in food, service, presentation, and cleanliness. My staff memorizes that, and they know my core values, which is passion, integrity, commitment, and appreciation. If you can't establish that, and it took my wife and I a long time to come up with those 7 words. It took us 3 months to come up with those 2 7-word sentences. If you don't do that, don't waste your time. It's too cutthroat. Business is too cutthroat. There are many, many other ways that people will undercut you, either in ways you never thought. And if you don't think that a competition will kill you, the government will. So you have to really know what the next burden, next straw that's going to be put on your back. You don't know what that is, and it really affects your business. So you have to have a lot of stomach, and you have to have a lot of reasons why people want to come to you. Otherwise, they won't, and you'll be done. That's why a lot of businesses go out of business.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that out here.
You see it all over the place.
Yeah.
Actually, you see it less here, right?
Less here than what you would expect in other...
Right. If you go up west, you see a lot of new restaurants all the time, continuously changing hands. Here we have it too, right? You have you have places that once they are established and they have a reputation and they have, owners that really care, they stick around for a while. You don't see too many of them. I mean, they do. You have like the stragglers that come in every year. You're going to have a handful of restaurants that come in that replace the restaurants that tried, failed. I mean, that's just normal. But up west, it's like 60% of them. A lot of 60% in the city. I was walking through the FIDI Financial District. I'm like, holy cow! Every other building is for rent. And you see all these places, and they're just like, I'm sure their rents are huge, and they're half empty or empty. I was like, how do they do it? They don't.
Yeah, a lot of them don't. And then just lastly, I had a question that I just thought about in terms of your parents and your dad with the restaurant and seeing him there and then you operating the restaurant and in the last few years, did he ever say anything about what he thought about it more recently in terms of just how it evolved more so? And did he ever tell you anything about that in terms of what he thought about that later on in life?
Yeah, we had a couple discussions about that because I was always moving the restaurant in a different direction, and he was very much against it a lot of the time. And then I would do something, and he'd see the fruit in it. He'd be like, "Yeah, I got to tell you, I didn't think that was going to be a good idea, but it really turned out to be a great idea." And then I'd try to do something else, and he'd be like, "I didn't think that was going to be a good idea." And he fought me. It's always this constant battle between my dad about what to do and what to improve, because he didn't leave the restaurant. Like, how do you see what's going on in the world if you don't leave the restaurant? You can't. I did, and I would go around and I'd be like, "Wow, I know what motivates these people." So he would listen to, I would listen to it. But then here's one thing, like, none of us anticipated. Like, none of us anticipated that everything would go haywire simultaneously. Like, none of us anticipated there would be huge price increases and huge changes in what was expected of us as a business. And it all kind of happened all at the same time. And when you're a small outfit, you can survive that. When you're a big outfit, and we're not that big where we could absorb a lot, it gets really hard to be in the category of restaurant that I am. If you notice now, you'll see a lot of restaurants open up, very few seats, very few staff. Yeah, and that's really the only way that you could survive. You have your 20 seats, 30 seats, you have like 1-2 people in the kitchen, 1-2 people up front. That's it. Because when it's lean, you could survive that. When I have 30, 40 people working for me, it's really hard to sustain that, especially when we don't have the volume that we should have all the time. Mm-hmm. So when my dad, he'd get a little nervous, and then, we'd start seeing the result. There would be a cause and effect. Yes, we'd be busier in the summer, but we couldn't sustain it in the winter, and it was it was a problem. So we constantly had that back and forth with him when he was alive. Yeah.
Mm. And I just asked at the end if there was anything else you wanted to touch on or discuss that we hadn't talked about. Or
you were incredibly thorough, so you covered pretty much all the points. No, I mean, the only thing I would say to anybody listening here is if you decide to make yourself a resident on the North Fork, make sure you tie yourself into the community. Mm-hmm. It's one of the most precious assets that we have out here, that everybody really just kind of does something, leave it nicer than the way you found it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that takes effort, yes. And a lot of people that move out here they have that mindset, and I'm thankful for it. Mm-hmm. I just like to see that continue for my children's sake,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, so I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and telling your story. And I loved hearing the history behind the restaurant, and I've been there multiple times, and it's wonderful. So I want to thank you for the wonderful job you're doing and with Hellenic Restaurant.
Thank you so much. It was an honor and a pleasure, and I'm really thankful that you had me on. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 46 with George Giannaris. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.